Hello and welcome to another League video here on ModernNexus.com. My name is Ryland, also known as holyshamgar, and today we're going to be playing a Death Shadow Jund deck. So the list that I'll be playing with today is just a regular old Jund deck in the main, but as far as the sideboard package, we do have some white cards here that we're splashing, and we'll certainly get into that in greater detail. So for anyone who's unfamiliar, certainly the namesake card here is Death Shadow. A 1/1 that can get quite large depending on your life total. So the lower your life total is, the larger this Death Shadow will be. Our other threat includes Tarmogoyf. Certainly one that I'm sure a lot of people were familiar with. Certainly gets pretty large for 2 mana as well. Not quite as large as our shadows can often get, but does not require us to pay as much life to get there. To find these threats, we also have Traverse the Uvenwald. Once we have Delirium, that is 4 card types in our yard, we can use Traverse to tutor for our Death Shadows or our Goyf, so that we can be a little more threat dense without having to play threats that aren't these cards, since these are certainly just our best threats. On top of that, we've got the the discard package of Inquisition of Kozilek as a 4 of and Thoughtseize as a 4 of. We want to kind of control the pace of the game and have early and efficient answers. This deck is largely trying to pay as little mana as possible. It does have a pretty low land count at 18. And certainly discard is one of the cheapest ways to interact with your opponent and is generally good against all of your opponents. Certainly there are matchups where it is more or less powerful, but it is a card you typically are going to want, both Inquisition and Thoughtseize. On top of that, we also have a little bit of removal in Fatal Push, and then the kind of interesting piece is Tarfire. Again, if this deck is not one you've seen before, which probably by now you have, but if it's not, Tarfire may be a surprise to you. I think Tarfire is particularly important in this deck and actually just is kind of undervalued in general. You'll notice I'm on 2. Some people have cut all the way down to 1 or just cut it entirely, especially the Splash Blue variants. But Tarfire can really help accelerate you into Delirium early. It can also help accelerate your Tarmogoyfs into a pretty good size, which can be important if you're facing down Tassigurs or Gurmag Anglers early in the game, which of course are 4/5s and 5/5s respectively. So growing your Tarfire growing your Tarmogoyf with Tarfire larger than those things can be very important, and Tarfire being both an instant and tribal spell is particularly good at doing that. On top of that, you can also use it to accelerate a shadow if you Tarfire yourself on turn 1 after like fetching for a Blood Crypt. That can be a pretty quick way to get you into Death Shadow range. So that's another thing to think about. So I think Tarfire is kind of part of the glue that helps hold this deck together. As far as other removal spells, we also have what I would consider a flex slot, 1 Terminate, a flex slot, and 1 Abrupt Decay, and even a Liliana of the Veil. Obviously, this is not just a removal spell. This has some other discard elements as well. On top of that, we've got 2 Liliana the Last Hopes, which are particularly good at recurring our threats. And in the modern meta at the moment, also reasonably good at killing things. +1 will kill any X1s, which you'll find a lot of in something like the Counters Company deck or Affinity, or against Lingering Souls or what have you. Mana Dorks. We also have Kolaghan's Command, which is another kind of part removal spell, part discard spell, part flex slot. It's also very good at recurring our own threats. And again, we're pretty threat light, so recurring those threats is certainly important. And then we have some enablers in Street Wraith and Mishra's Bauble. These A, allow us to play essentially what is a 52 card deck, and B, allow us to get Delirium a lot faster. In the case of Street Wraith, allow us to pay more life for our shadows. And they also, of course, are additional types to grow our Tarmogoyf. In the case of Mishra's Bauble, you can also kind of control your draw steps a little bit. If you have a fetch land in a Mishra's Bauble, you can look at the top card of your own library and manipulate that with your fetch land to get sort of a pseudo scry. Of course, not quite as good as a scry since you're shuffling, not putting the card on the bottom, but you still get a little bit of manipulation, which can help with the deck on this few lands and this many fetch lands. Our mana base includes 12 fetch lands, of which Polluted Delta is the worst, considering that Polluted Delta cannot get our Stomping Ground. Our Verdant Catacombs and Bloodstained Mires can get all of our fetch lands, which include 1 Blood Crypt, 1 Godless Shrine for our white splash in the sideboard, 2 Overgrown Tombs, 1 Stomping Ground, and 1 Swamp. So we really only have 6 lands that can produce colored mana, and these 12 fetch lands. As far as our sideboard is concerned, we do have this white sideboard package. Lingering Souls and Ranger of Eos certainly go in any matchup that you consider to be potentially grindy. That's like any of your black-green X mid-range decks, Grixis, anything like that. Anytime you expect the matchups to go long, if you're against blue-white control, anything like that, Lingering Souls and Ranger of Eos can both pack a punch in those matchups. The other white cards, which I think are just as appealing reasons to splash white, are Kataki and Eidolon of Rhetoric, and these give you both good tutor targets in particular matchups. So against something like Storm, you're particularly happy to have Eidolon of Rhetoric as a tutor target, or even against something like Ad Nauseam. Now against Ad Nauseam, it's quite a bit worse. It just buys you a little bit of time. But against Storm, they really have to deal with this card, or they're going to have a lot of trouble winning the game. Kataki certainly comes in handy against any artifact-based deck, whether that be Affinity or KCI, that being Cart Clan Ironworks, excuse me, or any, like I said, any other artifact-based deck. Lantern, you can catch people off guard with Lantern as well. The other kind of sideboard options we have here, if we expand this a little bit, we have 3 Graveyard Hate slots and 2 Surgical Extractions and 1 Spellbomb. Spellbomb is a little bit better at coming in the fair matchups, things like any Grixis deck, stuff like that. You're able to bring in Spellbomb, where maybe you don't necessarily want to bring in Surgical. We have the 4th Fatal Push, 2 Collective Brutalities, which are certainly very good against Burn, and then 3 Fulminator Mage for any big mana deck, such as a Green-Red Vellicut deck or a Tron deck or anything like that. So that is the list we'll be playing with today. Certainly there are similar but slightly different lists. I kind of alluded to the blue splash lists as well. Those are all lists that I've played around with. Lately I've actually been playing around with a Sultai splash white list as well. So there's a lot of ways you can go with Death Shadow. This is currently my front runner, my favorite kind of style of list. But like I said, I'm still kind of messing around with a lot of different lists and seeing what works best. But let's just go ahead and hop in here and see how it goes. See you in round 1.